excited to introduce Mike to the stage, who's going to be talking to us about why disability matters and changing the disability conversation. So, Mike, over to you.
After that introduction, Ruth, there's only one way this is going to go, I think. But absolutely delighted to be with you today. Real cricket weather. I got absolutely soaked taking my son to school this morning. But I want to talk to you about workplaces. I want to talk to you about talent. I want to talk to you about being inspiring. And I want to talk to you about talented individuals that just happen to have a disability. One thing you'll know about me is I'm absolutely terrible for time. So I will go as fast as I can, but you make sure that I have the prompts, please. The second thing is I'm going to say something, Ruth, if you move it to the next slide, please. I'm going to say something that I will never say to my 14-year-old daughter, and that is you have permission to go on your phone and social media while I am talking to you. So if you are on LinkedIn, if you try and find us at We Are Purple, our LinkedIn community is going to be listening in to what we're saying today, and our offices as well, because the real challenge is how do we provide enough hints, tips and tricks that creates a workplace environment that understands reasonable adjustments. And I absolutely cannot give it totally justice this afternoon. So we're going to start a community conversation and hopefully carry on, because what I want you to go away with in the next 2, 3, 4 days is a bunch of practical things that have worked in the workplace elsewhere that you can import into your organisation that will make your organisation inspirational to disabled employees. Right, so I wanted to start about why disability should matter to you and to your organisation. And I don't want to confuse you with too many LinkedIn, but that's my own LinkedIn, which I use to tell the story about why we need to change the disability conversation, using examples in my life that I hope would resonate with people who read it. And because this is about workplaces today, I have removed the picture about my inclusive COVID jab and replaced it with a picture of me in the office, which is actually really boring having looked at it. And Miranda, actually it's a real shame, because I would say to you, the NHS showed me in lockdown how far we had come in terms of inclusive experiences and my inclusive jab, which I thought was going to take forever, and I was in and out within 3 minutes. And you absolutely know when the world has changed, when the nurse looked at me and she smiled and said, "So Mike, which arm then?" And you just know at that moment that you have crossed the Rubicon that hopefully we will never go back on. But in some ways, I want to tell the story about reasonable adaptations. I have an office, I have a desk that goes up and down, I have software that enables me to talk to and do emails. Still 10 years on, I have to be very careful with my Fs as I dictate. Otherwise, people could get really offended with what I say. But generally speaking, I'm absolutely pretty independent within my own workplace. The bottom left picture is a picture of my pet rabbit, Boo. who a number of months ago we came downstairs, went into a shed, and he was lying on his side. We took him to the vet. He said there's a 50-50 chance of him surviving. Gave him some medication. We made some reasonable adjustments to his shed, and he now lives a full life. The reason I say that is because 80% of disabled people have hidden disabilities, and 83% of disabled people acquire their disability throughout their lifetime. So I am known as Mike, but I'm also known as a 17%er, which is the number of people, percentage of people born with a disability. So actually, we have to recognise that disability is a dynamic phenomenon for which 83% will acquire one throughout their life, and there is clearly a correlation between age and disability as well. On the bottom right-hand corner is fault lightning, which unbelievably I also saw last night down in Essex. But actually, it was the moment for me when I came downstairs about 4 months ago. I have twins as well, so just to go the full complement, I have 5 kids, but I haven't got time to tell a story about each and every one of them. But I came downstairs a few months ago, and one of the twins had my stylus and was operating my phone. Why? Because she knew absolutely no different. And the point about this is we can adapt, we don't have to stick to the norms, and we can create workplaces that are different to how they were 10, 20 years ago, but still as equally effective. And the final picture is me and the twins last June, on their 2nd birthday. A lovely picture of us holding hands as we walk through a farm. If you could pan the picture out and you have noise, what you still will see is a lot of people making comments, talking, etc., etc. And we've still got, the biggest issue around disability is changing the mindset, changing the perception. Doesn't cost a penny, but it's where we've got to get to if we are going to really inspire everybody in the workplace. Next slide, Ruthie. So here is very briefly my go-to disability equation slide. We are talking about 22% of the population. And because the international sign for disability is the wheelchair, which you recognise that throughout the world has done absolutely brilliant to raise the profile of disability, but represents 8% of the disabled population. And when I come and give talks and I talk about disability, that is predominantly where people are thinking I'm talking about. 8%. 80% of disabled people have hidden disabilities. And, that tells you that within this audience, 1 in 5 people will have a disability, and out of that 1 in 5, 80% of them will have a hidden disability. And so you have to reorientate your head and your thinking and your assumptions in order to engage, but in order to maximise potential and performance and well-being. So, so the business case for disability, I always talk about the purple pound, the £274 billion consumer spending power of disabled people and their families, for which only 10% of businesses have any kind of strategy to access that market. So for organisations that do, that is a huge opportunity. And in the world that we're currently living in, can businesses afford to forget about 22% of the population? And can organisations that are absolutely desperate to recruit and retain talented individuals just forget about thinking about a group of people who happen to have a disability? And on the basis that 75% of disabled people have either left a website or a shop or restaurant due to poor customer service or poor accessibility, there is a huge opportunity for those who get it right. And I would say to you, online accessibility is the new kind of phenomena about how we engage with businesses, how we buy products and services in a blended way, how we talk. I think Miranda talked about Yammer. Well, if it's not accessible, then your disabled staff may not be able to engage in internal conversations. And trying to make something more inclusive, you could end up making it exclusive for a whole number of people. So if we move on. So I'm not going to cover this, but just in types of disability. And it's really interesting that I think, going back to what Miranda says, I think since lockdown and COVID, mental health is probably the issue that I talk about most in my world. And I do believe if there is any legacy coming out of COVID, and that's really hard to think about at the moment, blowing the myth of mental health is probably going to be one of them. And why? Is because, one, people who never thought it would touch them have been touched, either themselves or a family member. And also, for organisations, it is probably the greatest well-being performance challenge that you have. So people are having to address it, are having to have a voice, and are having to talk about it. And it's also interesting to know how many people know that cancer you have rights under disability regulation even when you are fully recovered. And I think the point of this is just to be clear about the group of people, the very diverse, the 22% of people in the UK we are talking about when we talk disability. So we move on to the next slide. So why do disability workplace barriers occur? Partly because there's a lack of representation in the workforce, and that is directly related to the fact that 80% of disabled people have hidden impairments, and for those individuals, they then have a choice about whether they choose to disclose with their employer or not. And that is a tough issue, because you only want to do that if you think it's going to be beneficial to you and not detrimental. And so organisations have got a real challenge to create an environment where individuals disclose their impairments, reasonable adjustments are put in, and they perform even better. And it's interesting, I've been talking to ERGs and groups like that, how underrepresented they are with hidden impairments, given that 80% of disabled people have hidden impairments. There's a real challenge there about representation in the workforce. There is an issue about not seeing disability as a risk, health and safety, but seeing it about unlocking talent. The fear of unintentionally offending, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing that will unintentionally offend me, and so your default position is to swerve the conversation altogether. Well, if you do that, I'll never engage with you. And whether that's in a retail setting, but if your HR department have that mentality, then I won't get shortlisted and I won't work for your organisation, and nor will the 14 million other disabled people in the UK. Lack of strategy, planning and integration. My goodness, we've got far too many things on our plate. We can't possibly deal with disability. And I had to laugh the other day. I spoke to an organisation that will remain nameless, but they looked at me and said, "This is all very interesting stuff, Mike, but we don't intend to do disability till 2024. We'll come back to you." I don't often swear, but I struggled. And the reality is, within an organisation, look at your strategic priorities and disability-proof them. You start having a totally separate strategy around disability, as a bolt-on activity. It will not get done. Disability proof what you're doing, and then add on a bit of flavour with things that are dedicated to disability. And as I said, the size of the opportunity is absolutely misunderstood. If we move to the next slide. So framework for solutions. And Miranda talked about lived experience within an organisation. And she's absolutely right in terms of creating a voice for people with visible and hidden impairments. And I spoke to an organisation in lockdown, their chief executive who used to do, thank goodness it's Friday, virtual conferences with all their staff, which you could do. He talked about his work and their commitment in the organisation around disability and said, has anybody got any questions? As normal, that kind of silence comes across. And someone came off mute and said, I'm a senior exec in this organisation. I never thought I'd hear the day when someone spoke so candidly about disability and what this organisation is doing. Today is the day I'm telling all my work colleagues I've got a mental health condition and I've had it for 15 years. But I believe it's in my best interest today to tell you all. You can hear the gasp. 10 seconds later, well, if he's doing it, I'm now going to tell you that I've got dyslexia, and my coping strategy is I go home every night and do an hour and a half extra in order to keep pace with what I've got to do during the day. But actually, I'm going to tell, within 10 minutes, that chief executive had 5 extra people in his organisation who had disclosed the disability. And they have gone from strength to strength as an organisation to the point where their head of marketing, who I knew from another organisation, went there because of their approach to inclusion and diversity. So it has huge ripple effects. An accessible built environment, still really important, but it's not just about lifts and ramps. But in some ways, don't forget about it. Who can remember COP26, the Israeli minister, wheelchair user, not getting in the building to be able to talk? Really important, but we are now talking about an online world as well. Accessible digital assets. And what I normally do with time is say to people, go home tonight and do the no mouse test. So go home, fire up your laptop, get onto your home web page and unplug your mouse and see how far you can navigate through your website. That will give you a barometer on how accessible it is. And I will tell you, and there's people more expert in this audience than me on it, will tell you some of the fixes are overnight fixes that, and what I always say is, online website is your gateway to your customers. If your gate is closed, they will not be your customers. I did that about 3 years ago, but I did it at the very start. And of course, what happens is everyone gets out their bag, gets out their laptop, and decides to do the test there and then. And to be honest, I could have said what I like for the next 40 minutes, because no one listened to me. And also, it's about equipping your wider workforce. And real integration, real inclusion is taking your whole staff team with you. And there was a figure up there on the disability equation that said 50%. So I did this time last year a conference with Property, and they had a poll, and there was 305 people, and I said, given the definition of disability that I've said, you tell me how many of you either have a disabled relative or someone in your close network who meets that definition. The answer was 92%, not 50%, 92%. And my question to everyone is, would you want your aunt, uncle, brother, sister, nan, gran, cousin to come into your business and have a worse experience because they happen to have a disability? The answer's got to be no. So this is why we need to do something about it. We move on. But it's not just HR. This is a picture of Purple Tuesday, which is about improving the disabled customer experience. And there has to be a synergy with great organisations, because we know the best organisations are those whose workforce reflects their consumer base. So if you're driving to create more disabled people in your consumer base, you naturally will have to drive your workforce. And this is Piccadilly Lights that we light up every November. And this year we're doing Piccadilly Lights, we're doing the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, we're doing Minneapolis in the States and Malaysia as well, because this is a global issue. So, just to finish off, key takeaways. Leave here and do something. It's always my biggest, whenever I go to conferences, it's a great day, you go back to the ranch, so many things to do, you put your notes away, and next time you see them, they've got dust on them. So make a commitment to go away and do something. And I've got a slide in a minute about something called Purple 365, which is our online staff development program, webinars, which I can leave the information to you. It is a great way of organisations taking their staff with you. Tell someone one thing that you have learnt today, either one of the statistics that I have shown you, or the other thing I've learnt recently is when you talk to people with Asperger's or autism, the 6-second rule. So you ask your question and then you wait 6 seconds before jumping in, and I will absolutely tell you it gives that individual the time to process and respond a much richer answer and a much better experience for that individual. And change one thing that will make you more disability friendly. And at one level, signing your organisation up to Purple Tuesday is absolutely free, so just do it. This is the information about Purple 365, and increasingly this is now involving international organisations, and it's wonderful to see how similar the issues are in HR workplaces right across the globe. And finally, I'm going to leave you with for further information, but it's been great talking to you today, and I can't quite believe it, Ruth, but I'm actually on time.